These issues, whether it's AI or climate, these are global issues. And we have to make sure that countries are working together to address these issues, which is really hard in this day and age with all the conflict and sometimes the ego of some of our leaders.
Welcome to the Regulating AI Podcast with Sanjay Puri. AI is changing the world faster than rules can keep up. So how do we protect people without killing progress? Each week, Sanjay brings you inside conversations with global leaders, policymakers, and innovators who are wrestling with that exact question. So if you're curious about the future of technology and how it's governed, you're in the right place. Joining us today is none other than Senator Scott Wiener of California, a leading voice on technology policy and one of the key lawmakers shaping how the world thinks about AI, digital rights, and innovation governance.
Senator, welcome to the Regulating AI Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Just to set the context a little bit, Senator, you have talked about how your mom used to fold newsletters in a tiny synagogue, and your parents met in a Lutheran church, and your family fled pogroms and experienced a lot of anti-Semitism and have built community institutions. So when you think about AI, catastrophic risk, bioweapons, mass casualties, and other, biases and other things of that nature, does the family history of existential threats make you approach this, so to speak, hypothetical risk differently than critics who say, hey, we should wait for demonstrated harms, Senator?
Yeah, thank you for having me. My family history is, my family, like so many people in different parts of the world, came to this country fleeing violence and repression and to find opportunity. They came from Russia and Eastern Europe, Jews fleeing pogroms where they would burn down our villages and kill people. And they came here to make lives for themselves, which is one of the reasons I am so pro-immigrant, because when I see immigrants coming here today from Central America or Venezuela or from South Asia or wherever else, I see my own family in those families. Early on in my life as a Jew living in an extremely non-Jewish area with lots of anti-Semitism, as a closeted gay teen, during a mass die-off of gay men during the worst of HIV/AIDS, I learned early on that government is not just about the small things and about, are you happy or unhappy? It could be a matter of life and death, particularly for communities that are underrepresented, that are marginalized, and so forth. And so early on, I learned that you have to know what's happening in government and you have to care. And so that's really guided my policy making, particularly in protecting civil rights of so many different communities and so forth. I've also learned that government has a solemn responsibility to try to make people's lives better and more affordable, and also to protect people's health and safety. And so when it comes to AI it's incredibly powerful, fast-moving technology. It has the possibility, and I hope the likelihood of making people's lives better, curing diseases that we thought were incurable, helping us resolve climate change, fighting wildfires or preventing wildfires or reducing the damage from wildfires, and so on and so forth. There's so many areas where AI absolutely can improve people's lives and benefit humanity. But as with any powerful technology, there are also risks. And we know that those risks come in various forms. There's the catastrophic risks that we were focused on the last 2 years around targeting the grid or the banking system or chemical, biological, nuclear weapons, and so forth, cybercrimes, mass cybercrimes, and then other risks like deepfakes, risks to employment without any kind of real plan for what's going to happen to the folks who are displaced, and so on and so forth. And so we need to try to understand those risks and get ahead of them, not to eliminate risk. Life is about risk. You can't eliminate it. But if we can reduce the risk, we should do that. And historically with technology, we've just ignored the risks as a society and as a government. We still don't have a national data privacy law in the US. We still don't have a national social media law. We don't have a deepfakes law. We don't have a net neutrality law. We've just let it flow with benefits and with harms. And so AI is so powerful and so fast moving. Let's try to get ahead of those risks.
Let's talk about California per se, which is where you are, and some of this stuff is happening. And you repeatedly said, if any state can do it, California can. And you cite California's leadership on data privacy, net neutrality, and emission standards. But there are some critics who say that California exceptionalism, that 12% of Americans shouldn't set policy for the other 88%. And sometimes companies don't always comply with California standards nationwide. So, what makes you confident that California can set the template, Senator, for national AI policy when Congress sometimes explicitly refuses to act?
Yeah, and because Congress has failed to act in certain areas, areas around climate change, areas around technology policy, and so forth, California takes on an outsized role. California is by far the largest state. We are, depending on the day, either the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world. And so even with, we're 12% of the US or a little more than that, but we always punch way above our weight class culturally in terms of Hollywood and economically and in terms of Silicon Valley and agricultural sector. We are a powerhouse. And when we act, people pay attention, and we often set a standard. And we've done that for many, many years around auto emission standards. And it's happening now around climate policy and technology policy. And that's okay. And again, ideally, we would have amazing policy coming out of Congress. And I don't want to diss Congress too much. Congress under President Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer actually produced a lot of great policy before Trump took office. He's now trying to dismantle everything. So Congress is capable of acting, but there are certain areas where Congress has really struggled to act. And so California has a responsibility to lead because we're in a position to do so.
Senator, you had two bills, and again, we have a global audience, so I'm going to try to simplify. One was SB 1047, which was a liability bill with penalties up to, I think, 30% of training costs. And then SB 53 is a transparency bill with penalties capped at 1 million. And again, for our global audience, there were two bills that Senator had proposed. One went through legislation and got vetoed, and the second one got approved. Some might say that you capitulated to industry pressure. Others might say transparency is smarter than prescriptive mandates. Which is more important, according to you, for our listeners?
Well, the actual reason is that bills can't become a law without the governor's signature. And so the first time we went with a liability approach, and almost the entirety of industry opposed the bill, ranging from not all of the large tech companies, but most of them, the investors and VCs. We had a number of startups that supported the bill, but a lot of the startups opposed the bill. So there was just very broad-based opposition. And there was also enormous support for the bill. So as the governor stated in his veto message, SB 1047 created its own weather system, and it did. And it played a very important role that it elevated this issue of safety in AI innovation, and how can you both support innovation and safety. And it was a long overdue conversation, and it was very productive. Ultimately, the governor vetoed the bill, and the governor then, as part of that veto, set up a 3-person working group with folks who had diverse opinions on SB 1047, and asked that working group to produce recommendations. And so we then worked with those recommendations. We kept some of the elements of the first bill, whistleblower protections, very strong whistleblower protections, creating a public cloud called CalCompute to try to democratize access to compute. And then we incorporated the key elements of the governor's working group report, which focused, instead of liability, on transparency, to require AI labs to say whether they have safety protocols. And if they don't, they have to say it, and they can no longer claim that they're taking safety seriously. And then if they do, which I think they largely do, disclose what they are so the public can see. And so there's that level of transparency and accountability. Obviously, I supported and continue to support the first approach, but the governor vetoed it. And so we ended up passing a strong bill that sets a strong standard that the nation is paying attention to. And I'm proud of the work that we did. And we were able to get the governor to sign it. And Anthropic came out in support of the bill. The other tech companies did not. So they didn't love the bill. But we were able to navigate this. So we had, enough support from the governor that we were able to get the bill signed into law. And so is it a capitulation to industry? No, absolutely not. Most of industry would have preferred that this all go away. They don't want anything. So it's clear they prefer 53 to 1047, but it wasn't because of industry that happened. It was because of the governor vetoing the first bill. So obviously you have to try a different approach.
Yeah. And as you said, the country is now paying attention to this, Senator. Senator, the U.S. Senate voted 99-1 against Ted Cruz's 10-year moratorium on state AI laws, and you have said it's one of the most irresponsible things that you've ever seen. Now, there are policy experts that say that federal regulation might be better than a patchwork of state laws. Now, as you are running for Congress also, and if you make it and Democrats control both chambers of Congress, would you support federal AI legislation that preempts California laws?
Yeah, first of all, let's be clear that Congress has failed to act on technology regulation under both Democrats and Republicans. It's been a bipartisan failure. And I agree philosophically, if we can enact strong federal regulation that's not just lip service, but strong and real and impactful, that is preferable to having potential variation at the state level. I've been clear about that from the beginning. So in California, we passed our state privacy law, data privacy law, and we're very proud of that. And there have been efforts to preempt it with federal regulation. Those have all failed. But the concern is that it could be weaker regulation and weaker enforcement. So when it comes to federal preemption of state efforts, I'm very cautious about that because A, the federal law could be weaker, B, the federal law could go unenforced, and C, if you pass a reasonable federal law that preempts state laws and then a few years later it gets, let's say, weakened, right? Like a different government comes in place and weakens it, and then you have a weak law with preemption. So I'm cautious and a bit skeptical of preemption, unless you have an ironclad guarantee that there's going to be a really strong federal law with strong enforcement. So that's my take on it. And if I'm in Congress, then clearly we're going to, tech policy is something that's important to me and important to a lot of people. And sometimes I want to be clear. Sometimes regulating tech for public health and safety gets pitted against innovation as if the two are inconsistent. So if you're in favor of safety, you're somehow against innovation, and vice versa. A large swath of people and a large swath of people in tech are in the middle. They want strong innovation, and they also want reasonable protections for the public. And that's where I am. I am proud that San Francisco is the beating heart of AI innovation. I want that to continue. I think it's amazing. And I also want to make sure that we're being responsible about it.
Senator, you talked about that where AI could, cause massive economic displacement. And we're starting to see some of that the speed of implementation is faster than we've ever seen. You regularly mention 500,000 Californians who are truckers, Uber drivers, delivery workers through autonomous vehicles, etc., could be replaced by AI at some time in the future. But neither SB 1047 nor SB 53 addressed labor displacement, worker retraining, or AI taxing AI profits or safety nets. What was the reason you didn't want this bill to be addressing some of those issues at all?
When you're talking about a big, like when I do a lot of housing work, you're never going to do a housing bill that covers every single aspect of housing. That's just not how, or doing a healthcare bill that covers every single aspect of healthcare. That's not how legislation works, nor should it work that way, because then the individual pieces aren't going to get the attention they deserve. So SB 1047 and 53 addressed one specific aspect of AI risks, specifically catastrophic risks. Over the last few years, there have been a number of bills in the legislature to address deepfakes, deepfake revenge porn, deepfake election fraud. There have been bills to address chatbots, like chatbots that try to get kids to kill themselves, for example. And there have been bills to try to address issues around energy and water and data centers. So there have been, it's all handled specifically. So AI workforce risk is a really critical issue, and I think we are still. I don't think anyone has the solution to it, because we know that new technology has always changed work and eliminated jobs and created different kinds of jobs back to the beginning of humanity. But the difference now, as you sort of mentioned this in terms of the fast-moving pace, is that historically, when like the printing press came around, I would need to study this, but I'm going to speculate that when the printing press came around, it probably took a very long time to have mass job changes, decades, maybe a century, because the world just moved at a slower pace then. And so you have a long period of gradual change. Even like the personal computer that came out when I was a teenager in the 80s, and I still remember my Atari computer that I had. I was so proud of my Atari, I think 400 or 800, I can't remember which. I wish I kept it. I could have like donated it to the Smithsonian. But it took like a few decades for the personal computer to have really, really big impact. Same with the iPhone. I mean, it was shorter, but the iPhone, it took like a long period of time. So now we're seeing with AI development, it is so fast, and we're seeing very fast impacts on jobs. And that is, it's not about banning technology or anything like that, but it is, how do we deal with that? Because our society is not very good at that kind of adaptation, fast adaptation. And I worry that you're going to see big classes of jobs be eliminated overnight. It's an exaggeration, but over a period of months or a few years. And you're going to see a lot of people who are thrown out of work and who have either no other options or only other options to take massive pay cuts. And that will have huge impacts on society, economically, politically. When people are desperate and feel abandoned, grifters like Donald Trump can come to power. And so we have to make sure that we are not just abandoning people. And if it becomes a situation where you have a tiny group of people who are now becoming, billionaires, or in Elon Musk's case, I guess, is he now going to be a trillionaire, with that scam he's pulling at Tesla? That you have a small group of people who are, flying around the world with President Trump and going to his gilded ballroom and going to Saudi Arabia and doing all the things. And then you have a huge swath of people who are eating cat food in the gutter. That's not a good result for society. We have to grapple with that. And these fights are going to play out. And sometimes they're going to be like the polar opposite. We need to ban this technology, or we need to just let it run, completely roughshod. And there has to be an approach where we allow technology to evolve and innovation to happen in ways that improve people's lives without people being upended in that kind of massive way. And I don't pretend to have all the solutions to it. And I've heard very few people who do. Some people have said we should tax robots to create basic income. I will say that this is beyond economics. For humanity, there's that old saying, the idle hands are is devil's workshop. And sometimes those old sayings are very wise. I don't know that human beings were really designed to just lounge around all day. And when people have or just don't have meaning in life, and don't have, and whether it's raising a kid or working or what, just have that kind of meaning, that's when people can get sucked into wormholes on the internet, when addiction can happen. So it is so complicated, and but we have to resolve it.
And we are starting to see job losses. Talk about young people coming out of colleges are really having a hard time. Uh, Senator, just one final point. Do you think the federal government or the state government has a role to play in this kind of a situation with these job losses that might be coming down?
The federal government, let's be clear, the federal government has more tools economically to bring to bear. Congress has much more flexibility in terms of taxation and spending than state governments do, because state governments, we have to balance our budget. Congress has just dramatically more latitude in terms of as the economy restructures around AI, how do we restructure government's response to it? But I know right now, this Congress and this president, that's not going to happen. They did reject the horrible preemption, although they're trying to pass it again. I think Donald Trump does not care about people. He would, for him, it's not a big deal if people are eating cat food in a gutter. Like, that's not a big deal for him, because he's a psychopath who does not care about people. And so we need to have a government that actually is people focused and cares about people's future.
Sandra, just to switch to the European Union has the EU AI Act, and their act focuses on deployers and high-risk applications across all AI systems. You focused on developers and frontier models. Who got it right, Senator?
I don't know. I think there are a lot of. It's a tough issue. We focused on certain size thresholds, and it is true that a smaller model can be, riskier, and a large model may not be risky, depending. And so it's always hard to try to determine. With the smaller models, I think what we were focused on, developing a large frontier model takes huge resources. And so while like a small startup could do that, it's much more likely to be a large lab. And so for the small models, what we wanted to be cognizant of was making sure we're not, harming startups' ability to innovate and not, and so that's why we made that choice. Was it the right choice? I think it was a reasonable choice. I understand people can differ, and the policy making is an evolving process. You can always change things, add, take away, modify, and that's the beauty of legislation.
Nothing is set in stone. Senator, for our listeners who want to understand your, so to speak, your regulatory philosophy, you want to deregulate housing construction, streamline permitting, and from that perspective. But you also want, for AI, you want oversight and safety protocols and transparency requirements. What would you say is your regulatory philosophy?
Yeah, I would dispute that characterization. I'm not in favor of deregulating housing. I'm in favor of having the correct and optimal level of regulation of housing. So, in my approach, I want us to have we have a housing shortage, and it shouldn't take 5 or 10 years to get housing approved. I want to have faster, more predictable approval processes where we set the rules ahead of time. And if you meet those rules, you get your permit, and it doesn't become politicized. We're still going to have building codes and safety rules and zoning. I think we should zone for more housing, more density, more apartment buildings, not just single family homes. We should allow for both. So that's not getting, for example, rid of zoning. It's just changing the zoning. So I think we've been too restrictive on our regulation of housing. And so I want to have still have good regulation, but less restrictive so we can build more homes. With AI, it's the opposite. Whereas housing, we over-regulated. With technology, we've at times under-regulated. In other words, often having zero regulation whatsoever. And so I want to make sure, I don't want to over-regulate technology, because we want people to be able to build and innovate and all that. But I also don't want to have like no regulation whatsoever, even if there's a health and safety risk. So my philosophy in general is we should have reasonable regulation that benefits the public without impeding the ability of people, whether technologists or home builders, to build and create things that improve the world.
So reasonable regulation, I think, is what the philosophy is that helps people. Senator, finally, we do have a lightning round of questions for our TikTok-oriented audience. So just quickly, one word or one sentence answers. And you've done this a zillion times, Senator. I watched your interviews.
I'll
So
try.
let's go. Should AI companies be allowed to train on copyrighted data without permission? Yes or
No.
no? Okay. Is open source more dangerous or less dangerous than closed source models?
Neither.
Hopefully, you're in Congress in 2027. Will you introduce a federal version of SB 53?
I don't know, TBD. The technology policy is something I am interested in and will continue to be engaged in. What specific bill I might introduce, I can't predict yet.
Name one thing the EU, the European Union AI Act, that got it right that you got wrong.
I think we focus on transparency, and I think that's really important. There are certainly good things and less good things about the EU Act, and I know they're making some changes now, as I understand that, because we want to make sure that we don't overregulate. I'm not criticizing the EU. There have been some aspects where maybe the EU went a little bit beyond where I think we should go in terms of promoting innovation, while we also protect public health and safety.
For our global audience, the toughest part of getting an AI law passed in Sacramento?
Intense lobbying by the large tech companies and the large investors. That is the hardest piece.
The hardest piece. Okay. Finally, AI liability be on the companies or should it be on the users?
It depends. If a model is dangerous, and this is existing liability law, if a model allows or facilitates something really harmful to happen, there could be liability there. There's also, at the application level, if someone takes a model and uses it for something terrible, there's liability there as well. So I think it can be either.
For the policy leaders who are listening to you around the world, is there a message that you would want to give? Because a lot of them know you. You don't know them, but these are people in countries around the world because we talk to a lot of them. Is there a message you would like to give to them?
Yeah, these issues, whether it's AI or climate, these are global issues. And we have to make sure that countries are working together to address these issues, which is really hard in this day and age with all the conflict and sometimes the ego of some of our leaders, first and foremost, our own leader in the US, but certainly other leaders as well. And we have to find ways to have global solutions. So we're working hard in California, and we're struggling at times at the federal level, but we have to move towards global solutions to some of these truly global problems.
At 6'7" being the tallest legislator, it does help because people are looking up to you. So Senator, thank you so very much and look forward to having you back again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Regulating AI podcast with Sanjay Puri. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought. Share it with someone curious about the future of AI, and join us next time for more stories and insights from the leaders shaping what's ahead, right here on the Regulating AI podcast.